Hi everyone, my name is Nikki, and today I'll be presenting on different measures of nicotine and cannabis polyuse among adolescents and associations with nicotine and cannabis dependence. So research on adolescent nicotine and cannabis polyuse, otherwise known as co-use or the use of both substances, is quite limited. But we know that polyuse is very common among US adolescents. So for example, as you can see here, nearly 70% of adolescents who reported using cannabis in the past month also reported using nicotine during that time. Nicotine and cannabis polyuse is associated with greater nicotine and cannabis dependence than using either substance alone, and research has also noted lower grades, more emotional problems, and higher levels of depression among this group. Polyuse is typically defined as any past 30-day use of multiple substances. So for this presentation, I'm focusing specifically on nicotine and cannabis polyuse. This definition does not distinguish between using both nicotine and cannabis daily versus using both substances weeks apart. More refined measures could help us to identify more problematic use patterns. So in the current study, we sought to compare dependent symptoms among adolescents reporting same-day polyuse of nicotine and cannabis, non-same-day polyuse, and use of either nicotine or cannabis exclusively. So to examine this objective, we used data from the fall 2022 wave of the ADVANCE study, which is a longitudinal cohort of high schoolers in the Southern California region. Our analytic sample included 3,800 adolescents and was racially and socioeconomically diverse. And using reported past 30-day use of nicotine and cannabis, we classified our sample into 5 mutually exclusive use groups. First, a poly same-day group, which who reported using both nicotine and cannabis on the same day at least once in the past month. A poly no same-day use group, which reported using both nicotine and cannabis in the past month, but never on the same day. An exclusive nicotine use group, an exclusive cannabis use group, and a group that reported no past month use of either substance. We assessed substance dependence using the Hooked on Nicotine checklist and the cannabis abuse screening test, and participants were classified into either a dependent group who reported either clinical or subclinical symptoms of dependence, or a non-dependent group. And we used logistic regression models to evaluate the association of the 5 use groups with substance dependence, adjusting for relevant covariates such as race, ethnicity, gender, subjective financial status, and anticipated year of graduation. So we found that 9% of our overall sample reported past month nicotine and cannabis or cannabis use. And on the left side of this pie chart, you see the 2 single substance use groups, so exclusive cannabis use and exclusive nicotine use. And on the right side, we have the poly substance use group, so the poly same-day group, as well as the poly non-same-day group. So we see that roughly twice as many individuals reported using nicotine and cannabis on the same day in the past month versus those who use both products but never on the same day. This graph shows the prevalence of cannabis dependence in red and nicotine dependence in yellow among the 2 exclusive substance use groups. So 31% of those in the exclusive cannabis use group were classified as dependent, whereas only 18% of those in the exclusive nicotine use group were classified as dependent. This graph shows the prevalence of cannabis dependence among those who reported using both substances on the same day, with over half of the group reporting dependence. So we see here those who did use on the same day versus those who did not use on the same day. And so among those who reported using both substances but never on the same day, 29% of them reported dependence, whereas over 50% of those in the poly same-day use group reported dependence. And so now we're also looking at nicotine use here. And again, we see a lower prevalence of dependence in the poly no same-day use group compared to the poly same-day use group at about 29% and 44% respectively. And here we see the dependence compared with both cannabis dependence and nicotine dependence, and we see that for both substances, there's higher levels of dependence among the poly same-day use group. So here we have a forest plot, and this plot shows the odds of nicotine and cannabis dependence of each use group compared to adolescents who did not use either substance in the past month as a reference group. So a value of 1 indicates the same odds of dependence as the reference group, whereas a value greater than 1 indicates heightened odds compared to those who did not use either substance in the past month. So first, I'll be focusing on nicotine dependence here, which is the plots at the top. And here we see that both polyuse groups have greater odds of dependence compared to those who have not used either substance in the past month. The poly same-day use group had 5.5 times the odds of dependence, and the poly no same-day use group had nearly 3 times the odds of dependence relative to those who had not used either substance in the past month. We also found that there were higher odds of dependence among those in the poly same-day use group compared to those in the poly no same-day use group. Interestingly, we also found that those who exclusively used nicotine in the past month were about as likely as those who did not use either substance in the past month to be classified as dependent for nicotine. And now looking at cannabis dependence, on the lower portion of the plot, we see that all groups have elevated odds of cannabis dependence compared to those who did not use either substance in the past month. And notably, those in the poly same-day use group had over 9 times the odds of cannabis dependence, whereas those in the poly no same-day use group and exclusive cannabis use groups had only twice the odds of dependence as those who did not use either substance in the past month. And like we saw with nicotine dependence, those in the poly same-day use group had much higher odds of cannabis dependence than those in the poly non-same-day use group, and this difference was statistically significant. In conclusion, we found that adolescents who reported past month same-day poly use had higher levels of nicotine and cannabis dependence than those who reported using both substances in the past month, but never on the same day. And this indicates that a same-day definition of poly use captures more problematic use than the past month definition alone, and thus it's important for researchers to measure a same-day poly use directly. Future research and interventions may consider prioritizing adolescents who engage in more concerning poly use patterns, such as same-day poly use. Thank you.